After the Black Island came King Ottokar's scepter, which saw Tintin travel to the fictional land of Sildavia. And this is, I believe, the first appearance of Sildavia, but it won't be the last in the series. Then came The Crab with the Golden Claws, which saw the debut of Captain Haddock, a fan favorite and a constant companion to Tintin from here on out. Then The Shooting Star, which added a little bit of sci-fi to the Tintin universe so far, with an asteroid headed for Earth and a race to get to it. I don't know why a lot of people don't seem to like this book as much. I think it's terrific, and it definitely has some of the best ships and instruments and mechanical things ever put on a Tintin book. In fact, Tintin is quite famous for its nautical themes and depictions, and this book, I think, is one of the crucial reasons why. This also put Captain Haddock to immediate good use by having his naval connections come into play in a very important way for the story of The Shooting Star. Now, everyone has their favorite Tintins, but most would recognize that these two were where the masterpiece stuff began. No matter what you think of the Black Island and King Ottokar's scepter and the Shooting Star and the Crab with the Golden Claws, The Secret of the Unicorn and Red Rackham's Treasure, a two-part story that was truly a two-part story about high adventure, flashbacks to the past with piracy and buccaneering and treasure, and a globe-trotting navigational challenge to locate this treasure is the first absolutely flat-out great Tintin story. And this is the story that was chosen for the movie, and it's easy to see why. It's accessible. You can actually start reading Tintin from here if you want to, and it ends with things that then become part of Tintin lore forever. It also introduces Professor Calculus, as well as right at the end, Marlinspike Hall being an estate of Captain Haddock's, and those two become mainstays in the Tintin adventures from here on out. But not only for that, it's a great story, and probably the favorite for many Tintin fans out there. The 1-2 punch of The Secret of the Unicorn and Red Rackham's Treasure is followed by another two-part story, The Seven Crystal Balls and Prisoners of the Sun, tell us the story of Tintin and Haddock and Calculus, again headed to South America, and this time to discover the secret behind an ancient Inca curse. It's part of the whole lore of Tintin globetrotting, dealing with the mysterious mixed into the real, and it's fantastic. Land of Black Gold sees Tintin dealing with nefarious schemes around oil and the Middle East. It's a fantastic story. It's got wonderful characters. All kinds of shenanigans take place over here, and there is the air of realism with right at the beginning war and everything looking like doom and gloom and things getting worse, with news radio stories constantly reiterating what's going on, is just a terrific tense setup for what turns out to be a rollicking adventure. Then we have another two-part story, probably the most famous two-part story in Tintin, Destination Moon and Explorers on the Moon, which see Tintin and Haddock and Calculus become the first men to land on the moon. And this was true. In the world of Tintin, Tintin was one of the first men to land on the moon in the crew, and Snowy was the first dog to land on the moon. This is a flat-out brilliant story. It's got great technical detail. It's got wonderful art. The character work is incredible. It's very funny, and it's very realistic. I mean, all of the depictions of the rocket ship and the preparation and their spacesuits and the rocket. I mean, it's not what it actually was, and the rocket does look like one of those retro sort of Flash Gordon type of rockets, but everything in it feels real in a way that you could believe that they were the first people on the moon, and this is how they did it. Great storytelling. Then we have The Calculus Affair, which is a fantastic cross-border spy intrigue story. It has microfilm, it has weapons that can destroy with sound, it's got a scientist, our friend, Professor Calculus, who everyone is after. It has just great storytelling. It moves at a mile a minute and is one of my favorites. This is Tintin on a roll over here. I mean, from The Secret of the Unicorn, there isn't really a bad Tintin. I mean, Prisoners of the Sun, not a lot of people would say they love it, but it's good storytelling. But the streak just continues with the Red Sea Sharks. It brings back characters you know, it introduces new characters. It's great on-seas adventure, again, working with the nautical themes that Tintin is so famous for, and the art is crackling. Tintin in Tibet sees Tintin go to Tibet and India. So that was a thrilling thing for me as a child, and I know it is for a lot of people. Although we haven't seen taxis like those stretch convertible things they had over here in Delhi, but it was fun to see Tintin in India. You see Tintin in Kathmandu, but on top of everything, this is just a wonderful story of Tintin looking for a friend who has crashed in the mountains, and nobody believes that he could have survived, but Tintin does, and it's the quest to get to him. It's a wonderful personal story, brings back a character from the Blue Lotus, and is just a sentimental as well as technical marvel. The Castafiore Emerald is perhaps the most experimental of all Tintins. It's formal and it's beautifully drawn, and the story seems very twisted, but at the end it doesn't really have a story. I mean, the whole idea is that it's so thrilling and it's so interesting, and it's just people hanging around, and it's a one red herring after another, and no resolution per se, in a fantastic way. This ends up being a character study and a situational comedy more than an adventure. I know some people don't like it because of that, but I think that's exactly the reason why this really stands out in all of the Tintins. Flight 714 to Sydney is actually a new title. When I was growing up, it was just called Flight 714. I don't know if that was confusing or I'm not really sure why they changed that, but maybe they wanted to make it a Tintin in Australia. Although if you read the book, you know that it's about the flight to Sydney. It's not about really going to Sydney. Nothing takes place in Australia because something happens to that flight. This is actually a great Tintin. I know some people say that this is not that good, particularly because of the ending or the kind of element that comes into it right at the end. I don't want to give a spoiler, but I think that's really what makes this so unique. It's a very different type of story. It's got elements in it that you haven't seen, although it has characters you've met before. It's got a fantastic interplay between them, and it's just unique. Flight 714 to Sydney, the second last Tintin. And the final Tintin, and one that I do not actually have in one of those Egmont hardbacks, this is my childhood copy, Tintin and the PICAROS. The last Tintin, not counting Alf art, which was unfinished. The last Tintin, it has Tintin in the titles, and it's one of the best. It's got terrific art. It's got fantastic art. This is possibly the most beautiful Tintin. You've got some incredible locales in here, but it's also very funny. It's very satirical. It goes back to South America. You meet some of the characters you've met before, but the real joy in this is seeing how the story unfolds from one location to another, and the characters that you come across, who you can trust, who you can't trust, the crosses, the double crosses, the ideological differences, what Tintin agrees with and doesn't agree with, what Calculus agrees with and doesn't agree with, and the way that they bounce off of each other make this perhaps the most complex Tintin as far as character interplay is concerned. It's all subtle, it's all very nuanced, it's not broad at all, but the stakes are very high because we are at the end of the day talking about a revolution that isn't really the centerpiece of this book. Again, like a couple of the books that we've seen before, Hergé just played with expectations where the revolution is actually not the point of the book. The point of the book is getting characters from point A to point B to point C and seeing how they bounce off of each other, all on the way to that revolution. So there you have it, 22 Tintins, missing that one, missing this one, maybe one day I'll get them and make a different video.